In this vast world, there are people who move through life led by logic first, and only later allow themselves to feel. And then, there are those who feel everything before anything even has a name. If you are Cancer, you probably recognize that space, that subtle vibration in your chest before something actually happens, that sudden wave of nostalgia when an old song begins to play, that quiet inner nudge, like a soft knock from within, reminding you that something is shifting. Cancer doesn't just live in the world of events. You live in the deeper layers of emotion. You can walk into a room and sense the atmosphere before anyone says a word. You can hear an ordinary sentence, and somehow it touches memories buried deep in your heart. Sometimes that sensitivity feels exhausting. Sometimes it makes you feel different. Oh, but that very depth is something not everyone carries. From a symbolic perspective, many spiritual traditions have spoken about angels connected to Cancer's journey, not as supernatural protection, not as some chosen privilege, but as metaphors for three very personal inner capacities, three quiet lights within you, steadying you when your heart begins to sway. The first angel can be seen as intuition, a whisper, soft but persistent. It's that moment when you're undecided and suddenly your chest tightens. It's a vivid dream that leaves you waking up with a feeling you can't quite explain, but somehow no matters. It's changing a decision at the last second because something inside doesn't feel right. Some may call that presence Archangel Gabriel, but you might simply call it the most sensitive part of yourself speaking up. And when you listen, your heart tends to soften. When you ignore it, fatigue quietly moves in. The second angel, through the lens of maturity, can symbolize boundaries and redirection. There are relationships that close without explanation, paths that stop even when you believed you would walk them to the end. Those moments can hurt. They can leave you asking why. And yet, in another light, they may feel like a gentle hand, turning you slightly before you travel too far away from yourself. This image is often linked to Archangel Michael, a symbol of protection and courage, but perhaps it simply reflects your ability to let go without losing compassion. Not every ending is failure. Sometimes, it's an adjustment that spares you deeper wounds later. And then the third angel. Perhaps this one is healing. Cancer often becomes a refuge for others. You listen. You care. You carry the sadness of loved ones as if it were your responsibility. But in all that giving, have you ever paused to ask who is holding your heart? Archangel Raphael is often associated with restoration and balance, yet inwardly, this may just be a reminder that you too deserve rest, that setting a boundary does not make you cold, that caring for yourself does not make you less compassionate. When these three images are seen as inner strengths, you may begin to realize you are not as fragile as you once believed. Intuition helps you recognize what feels aligned. Boundaries keep you from dissolving into other people's needs. Healing brings you back home after emotional exhaustion. Cancer. Your sensitivity is not a burden to hide. It's like water under moonlight, reflecting everything with quiet honesty. When you allow yourself to feel without self-blame, when you protect your energy with gentleness, when you place your hand on your chest and admit that you also need love, you begin to illuminate those angels from within. And maybe tonight, when the outside world grows quiet, you might sit still for a moment, listen more closely to your own heartbeat, and realize that this journey is not a race. It is a slow, deep return. A return to the inner light that has always been waiting for you to notice it. And the story, perhaps, is still unfolding softly with every breath you take. And as the story continues to drift in that quiet stillness, we can move a little deeper toward the first image that appeared so softly, like a thin line of moonlight resting on water. But some call that image Archangel Gabriel. In many traditions, Gabriel is associated with intuition, with inner messages, with emotional clarity. But if we gently set aside the religious symbolism for a moment, we might see Gabriel as something far more personal, a very intimate part of the Cancer heart, the part that knows before the mind has time to understand. Cancer doesn't just experience emotion, you absorb atmosphere. You walk into a room and sense tension, even while everyone is smiling. You speak with someone and feel the sadness hiding behind their words. You wake from a dream and carry its echo with you all day, even if you can't quite explain why. None of this has to be mystical. It may simply mean your nervous system is a little more refined, your heart a little more open, your perception a little deeper than most. Have you ever been about to say yes and felt something in your chest quietly tighten? Have you ever been ready to move forward in a relationship, only to hesitate because of a dream the night before? Seen through the symbolism of Gabriel, those moments feel like reminders that you carry an emotional compass within you. That compass doesn't shout, it doesn't argue, it whispers. The challenge is this. Cancer often places others first. You hear that inner voice, but push it aside because you don't want to disappoint someone. You sense something isn't right, but tell yourself you're just being too sensitive. And then the exhaustion sets in. Not exhaustion from work, but from fighting your own feelings. When intuition is ignored too many times, your energy begins to scatter. Say it like water constantly stirred, never still enough to reflect the sky. In the symbolism of Gabriel, there isn't a dramatic miracle. There is subtlety, an invitation to listen. When Cancer allows themselves to pause, a few seconds before responding, a few minutes before deciding, that isn't weakness, it's honoring your inner rhythm. When you say, I need a little more time to think, you are giving your intuition room to speak fully. Sometimes emotional guidance shows up in dreams, images of water, light, familiar faces from the past. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet calm after you've cried, as if something inside you has finally exhaled. From a grounded perspective, this may simply be your subconscious processing what you haven't yet said out loud. Whatever name you give it, the experience is real. Gabriel, at a symbolic level, doesn't require belief. It only suggests that you already possess a form of emotional intelligence worth respecting. When you listen to it, clarity may not come instantly, but the inner chaos often softens. When you honor the feeling of not yet, you may avoid unnecessary wounds. When you trust that brief warmth or that flicker of unease in your chest, you are practicing a very gentle kind of self-protection. Cancer sometimes wonders why they feel more deeply than others, but perhaps another question is waiting to be asked. What if this is not a burden, but an ability? What if intuition is not something to control, but something to walk beside? In the quiet of the night, when moonlight filters through the window, you may begin to realize that your emotions are not a chaotic wave, but a current with direction. And when you start trusting that current, a subtle relief can appear. Not because your problems vanish, but because you're no longer turning away from yourself. From there, your next steps may feel slower, deeper, as though something ahead is still waiting to be discovered, bathed in the soft light of your own inner knowing. And when you begin to trust that current of intuition, another phase may quietly arrive, more subtle, yet somehow stronger. An energy that doesn't only whisper, but sometimes knocks a little louder. Many associate that image with Archangel Michael, a symbol of protection and courage. But if we continue looking inward, Michael can be understood as the mature part of you. The part that knows love does not always mean staying at any cost. Cancer is known for loyalty. You stay when others have already left. You try to repair what has already cracked. You believe in someone's potential even when they no longer believe in themselves. There is something undeniably beautiful in that. And yet, sometimes that very beauty causes you to forget your own boundaries. Michael, in deeper symbolism, is not about cold detachment. It is the moment you finally acknowledge that quiet discomfort in your chest has been there for far too long. It is when you begin to notice you are shrinking inside a relationship that once made you feel alive. It is realizing, gently but clearly, that if you continue down the same path, you may lose something essential within yourself. Some endings arrive unexpectedly. A conversation stops. A door closes before you were ready. At first, it may feel like loss, as if the ground beneath you shifted. But if you step back, just slightly, you may see that the shifting began long ago. You simply weren't ready to look at it. In Michael's symbolism, protection does not always look soft. Sometimes it arrives as an uncomfortable truth, a direct sentence that stings, a situation that forces you to choose what you have been postponing. Not as punishment, but so you do not remain too long in a place that slowly dims your light. Cancer often fears disappointing others. You may accept less to keep the peace. You may stay silent to avoid conflict, but the body eventually speaks. Lingering fatigue, restless sleep, a heaviness whenever you think about someone or somewhere. That may not be weakness. It may be your boundary asking to be acknowledged. Michael, as an inner symbol, is the moment you say enough without anger, and the moment you walk away without hatred, the moment you choose yourself without needing to explain. That kind of courage is rarely loud. It may happen quietly, one evening alone, when you realize your heart deserves peace. Perhaps you once experienced a relationship ending in a way you never wanted. Perhaps you lost an opportunity you believed mattered deeply. At the time, all you could feel was regret. But as time moved on, you may have noticed a subtle freedom emerging. Not every closed door is rejection. Some doors close so you don't keep knocking where you no longer belong. Michael's symbolism also speaks to emotional maturity. Maturity does not mean you no longer feel pain. It means you can continue walking with a sensitive heart. It means understanding that letting go does not make you less loving. In fact, it may mean you are learning to love in a healthier way, including loving yourself. Cancer carries a vast heart, but even a vast heart needs edges. When you learn to set boundaries, you do not lose your gentleness. You simply protect the source of your energy so it is not endlessly drained. And in the moment you step away from what no longer aligns, fear may arise. But somewhere deep inside, a very small sense of relief may also begin to form. Perhaps the deepest protection is not about avoiding all pain. Perhaps it is about being redirected away from what slowly erodes you. And when you begin to see life's unexpected turns, not as failure, but as recalibration, another quiet door may open within you, leading toward a softer layer of light, still waiting to be discovered. And when that door opens, ever so quietly within your soul, you may begin to touch another layer, a place that is no longer about listening to intuition or learning how to let go, but about returning and restoring. Here, people often speak of Archangel Raphael, a symbol of healing. But if we continue through the symbolic lens, Raphael may simply represent the gentlest part of you, the part that reminds you this heart also needs care. Cancer often becomes a refuge for others. You listen to unfinished stories. You hold sadness that isn't even yours. You stay silent when someone just needs a shoulder. You remember birthdays. You remember the small details others forget. And over time, you grow used to being the protector, the steady one, the keeper of warmth for family and close relationships. Well, but in all that giving, have you ever wondered who is listening to you? Who is placing a hand on your shoulder and saying, "You're allowed to be tired too"? The healer sometimes forgets their own need for rest. You keep giving, keep carrying, keep saying, "I'm fine," while inside, your energy begins to thin. Raphael, in deeper symbolism, is not rescue from the outside. It is the moment you realize your body needs to slow down. It is choosing a quiet walk beneath trees instead of replying to one more message. It is deciding to seek a therapy conversation, or simply sitting down to write out what has been building inside you. There are no dramatic lights, no sudden miracles, just a conscious choice to restore balance. Cancer carries a powerful ability to absorb emotion. You can feel another person's pain as if it were your own, and that is part of your compassion. But when those emotions are not released, they accumulate. And healing, the kind Raphael symbolizes, is not about erasing feelings. It is about learning to process them more gently. It is saying, "Today I need to be alone." It is realizing you are not responsible for saving everyone. Perhaps you have known a season when your emotions reached the bottom. Days you didn't want to leave the bed. Nights where your thoughts circled endlessly. In those moments, you may have felt weak. But what if? That was also the beginning of a new cycle of recovery, when you started listening to your body, when you chose nourishment over neglect, when you allowed yourself to cry without shame. Those small acts may have been the quiet activation of that healing energy within you. Healing is not returning to who you were. It may be becoming softer with yourself, Cancer is often endlessly compassionate with others and quietly harsh with their own heart. Raphael, symbolically, is a reminder that you do not need perfection to be worthy of love. You do not need constant strength to be respected. You do not need to carry everything to prove your value. Reconnecting with nature, with water, with quiet spaces can feel deeply restorative for you. The surface of water, moonlight, the scent of earth after rain. These things seem to speak your language. When you allow yourself to be near them, your heart may begin to recalibrate, slowly, without force. And then, you may begin to realize your deeper mission was never to sacrifice yourself into emptiness, but to offer care from a place of fullness. When you nourish yourself first, the love you give becomes healthier. When you set boundaries to protect your energy, your compassion no longer carries the bitterness of exhaustion. Raphael, in this symbolic story, does not stand outside of you. It lives in every decision to rest instead of pushing harder. In every moment, you forgive yourself for not being enough. In every deep breath where you notice, you are still here, still continuing, still capable of loving without losing yourself. And as you sit in that quiet, you may begin to feel a new balance forming, very gently, like a lake after the wind has settled, ready to reflect a wider sky. A sky where your inner journey is still unfolding, layer by layer, towards softer and deeper meaning ahead. And as the lake within you grows calmer, you may begin to notice the smallest things, subtle movements you once overlooked. Some people call them signs, a sense of unseen support, but through a more grounded lens, they may simply be moments when your inner world is recalibrating. After an emotional wave crashes through you, there are times when a sudden calm appears, not because the problem disappeared, but because your body stopped resisting. A softness, light as morning mist. And you wonder, why don't I feel as tense anymore? Maybe it isn't a miracle. Maybe it's your nervous system finally returning to balance. There are recurring dreams, water, light, a familiar face from the past, walking quietly through memory. You wake up feeling as though you just finished an unfinished conversation. Those dreams might simply be your subconscious processing what you couldn't face during the day. For Cancer, the night is rarely just rest. It becomes a sacred space where emotions are allowed to speak honestly. And then there are moments when a very clear impulse rises. I need to protect my energy. I need to decline this invitation. I need to stay home, instead of stepping into a crowded room. Once, you may have judged yourself for that. Now, you begin to understand. This isn't selfishness. It's self-respect. There were endings that once hurt so deeply, you felt you couldn't breathe. Yet months later, you look back and realize you feel lighter. You are no longer trying to hold on to something that had already left you from within. That lightness doesn't erase the past, but it shows you have moved through it. You are standing somewhere steadier. Perhaps that is intuition recalibrating, quietly guiding you toward what aligns more closely with who you truly are. Cancer carries the symbol of the moon, and the moon moves in cycles, full one night, barely a sliver the next. Your emotions follow cycles too. When you begin to see those fluctuations as rhythm instead of something broken, you slowly stop fearing yourself. In the late hours, when the world grows quiet, your inner voice becomes clearer. No elaborate ritual required, no long prayers, just a moment of honesty with what you are actually feeling. Recognizing these signs is really about learning to observe yourself without judgment. When anxiety settles, you don't rush to fill the silence. But when a dream unsettles you, you don't immediately push it away. When unease arises, you gently ask what it might be trying to say. That is a subtle form of maturity. And perhaps the most beautiful part is that you don't need to prove any of this to anyone. You don't need to declare that you've received some great revelation. The deepest transformations often happen quietly. In going to bed earlier, in saying no without guilt, in offering a small smile when you realize you've survived something that once felt impossible. Cancer. If you begin noticing these signals more often, perhaps it isn't outside intervention at all. Perhaps it is evidence that you are reconnecting more deeply with yourself. And as that connection strengthens, You may feel a quiet strength rising within you, like a tide, lifting slowly, almost imperceptibly, preparing to carry you further along the path of discovering your true worth. And as that inner tide rises so quietly within you, perhaps the most important thing is no longer the symbols, but the realization. Not the realization of something mystical, but the realization of yourself. The three images we've walked through, intuition, boundaries, healing, may not be distant forces at all. They may be three capacities that have always lived inside you, simply waiting to be named with gentleness. Cancer does not need supernatural guardians to be strong. What you may have lacked was never strength. It was permission. Permission to be sensitive without labeling it weakness. Permission to say, I need time, without guilt. Permission to rest without feeling you're disappointing someone. Your intuition is like moonlight on water. It is not loud like the sun, but it is enough to see your path in the dark. When you trust that first feeling rising in your chest, you are honoring your emotional intelligence. When you pause instead of rushing forward out of fear of missing something, you are protecting your own rhythm. Boundaries do not make you distant. They keep your heart from scattering itself. When you offer a gentle no, you preserve energy for what truly matters. When you walk away from what causes you to shrink, you create space to breathe deeper. No anger required, no explanations demanded, just a quiet inner decision that you deserve peace. And healing, perhaps the slowest process, and yet the most faithful. When you care for yourself with the same tenderness you once gave to others, something subtle begins to shift. A nourishing meal, a full night's sleep, a silent walk. These simple acts may not look dramatic, but they restore your inner light little by little. You may not call it activating protection. You may simply notice that you stand steadier, less shaken by emotional waves, less doubtful in difficult choices. And quietly, you begin to understand that the deepest protection comes from no longer turning away from yourself. Everything shared here is only a symbolic perspective, a story for reflection, not a fixed truth, not something you must believe. If it resonates, perhaps it is because it mirrors something you have long felt, but never put into words. Cancer is rarely alone in the deepest sense. When within you lives a reservoir of emotional wisdom shaped over years, you understand others' sorrow because you have sat with your own. You know how to comfort because you have learned to soothe old wounds within yourself. And every time you choose to trust your intuition, to set a boundary, to care for your own heart, you take another step in self-awareness. This journey may not be loud. It may unfold on quiet evenings like this, when you sit alone listening to your heartbeat. And in that silence, a gentle reassurance may begin to rise, as if you are walking beside a friend who understands every shade of your emotion. And when you realize that friend has always been within you, the road ahead may no longer feel so unclear. It continues to open, slowly, deeply, guided by the steady rhythm of your own breath.